and welcome to Good Grief, the podcast dedicated to demystifying and destigmatizing grief with compassion and humor. I'm Nikki, I'm an end-of-life doula and a grief coach in Columbus, Ohio. And today I have another fantastic guest episode where I got to sit down and talk with Sean Muzzy. Sean started Griefcycles, that helps men who are experiencing grief in their life, helps them through group bike rides and community. Sean also experienced his own loss, which is part of why he started this. But I'm going to let him tell that story, not me, because you're not here to listen to me tell other people's stories. You're here to hear them tell their own stories. Thank you so much for being here. As usual, I have to do my due diligence to remind you, if you love this podcast and you want to support me, please go over to patreon.com/Nikki the Death Doula. You can get early access to the show. You get grief affirmations and other bonus content throughout the month. And all that money goes towards a line item in my budget so I can provide pro bono services within the community. So head on over to patreon.com/Nikki the Death Doula. You can also learn more about this podcast and get some merch like this great shirt behind me and anything else on my website, nikkithedeathdoula.com/podcast is where you will get information on this podcast. Look around the rest of the site too. There's all sorts of great stuff there. So without further ado, I'm going to stop talking. We're going to get right into today's episode, my interview with Sean Muzzy. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Good Grief with Nikki the Death Doula. I am so excited to have another great guest on the show, my new friend, Sean. Sean, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Nikki. It's so wonderful to be here. So I'm
Yay!
very, very excited to do this.
Yeah, we were just chatting a bit before. Actually, we chatted a lot before this. We got very in the weeds. But anyway, we're going to do it again if I don't rein
We were just
myself
getting warmed
in.
up. That's all.
Rein it in, Nikki. All right, Sean, why don't you just take a moment here? I'd love for you to talk to my listeners. Tell us a little bit about you, where you are in the world, and why you're here today.
All right. Well, my name is Sean Muzzy. I am in the middle of South Carolina, 6.1 miles from the geographic center of South Carolina. That's our fun fact around here. And I am a podcast manager with Old State Media, and I also am the executive director of Griefcycles, which is a nonprofit that is set up basically as a support group for men based around cycling to just help them through, any loss, any of those things. We like to define grief here as when life doesn't live up to expectations, job change, divorces, anything where you were just like, I thought I was going here and now I'm over here and I'm sad about it or I'm feeling a way about it. We're here for you. So we have this group set up and it's been a really wonderful thing. It's kind of dug me deep into some parts of me that, needed some personal growth, I guess. But yeah, that's why I'm here. I'm working in grief. I'm living grief. It was the whole idea was founded when I had a son unexpectedly pass away at 18 in 2020. So it was, and being a longtime cyclist, it was one of the things that kind of got me going again. And so I was like, how can we channel this into something and try and make a positive where there clearly wasn't a positive.
Yeah, and that now my listeners know why I wanted to have you on the show because they know a passion for grief, but I'm also a cyclist as well and avid outdoors person. But when I met you, a friend of ours introduced us to each other, and you
Yes.
mentioned cycling. I'm like, I gotta talk to this guy.
Yeah.
So, but I was so excited to hear about grief cycles for many reasons. A, love biking, and I love using like alternate methods to talk about grief besides just sitting around a table and talking about your feelings, So, and even more so passionate about men's grief because men are so unrecognized with grief.
It's definitely, and it was interesting even when I first kind of envisioned this group. My wife worked in academic research for 15 years, and it was tons of counselors. So immediately that was like one of the places I went and was like, this is kind of my idea. And there were so many of them that I was like, I don't want to be exclusive because I'm generally one for very inclusive. Let's get everyone there. But when I mentioned I was thinking of doing it just for men, but I feel a little weird about it. They were like unanimously do it. Men need this. They need it. They need that place to be able to do it. And having something that's not a church basement or the YMCA, and I'm not. I don't want to knock any of those places, but
Right.
that's just not always for everyone. And I loved that this was something totally different, very active, and you can go out there and, even if you have nothing you really want to bring to the table, you go out there, you ride, and you walk away just feeling better about it.
Hmm.
You don't have to always spill your guts. You don't even have to be sad to come on these rides.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just nice to know that you're not alone.
Yeah. I love that aspect of just show up, right? You don't have to talk, you don't have to cry. You just ride your bike. And I know for me, like I talk about this on here all the time about like I like to go hiking, biking, things like that. And it helps me even when I'm by myself to just kind of give some time, some space, let the wind blow through my hair a little bit. And just the act of doing something makes me feel better, right? But to have that
100%.
yeah, and then to have that community with people who may or may not be feeling very similar thoughts, even if you don't talk at all, just knowing you're in that safe space where if you do say something or you do cry a little, you're not going to be
Yeah.
judged.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's really become also the other part of it that has been kind of unexpected is the amount of growth I've seen from participants as well. I expected it to be a lot of I know when I first, was even envisioning this, I was in a very sad place with my grief. It
Hmm.
just was weighing on me, and I was just like, okay, I'm gonna try to bring that good attitude and really, try to pick things up. But what I've noticed too is like the core group of people we have, not only are they showing up, but like, I had one guy in particular who reached out to me because I was doing these like 50-mile gravel bike races, not because I'm fast but because it was a challenge, and I was like, I want to set this challenge for myself. And he reached out and was just like, I see you're doing these. I want in. And I was like, well, okay, whatever. Tell me about it. And he's like, I've known him. I know he runs all the time. I was like, you're going to be fine. And he showed up on his kind of old school mountain bike one day, and I said, let's just go for a ride. And we went and rode like 30 miles, and we just had the best conversation. And we ended up doing that 50-mile race a couple times. And then this last March, he came to me and he's like, we're doing the 100-miler. And so him and I ended up training together, and it took us 8 hours, but we were the last ones to finish, but it didn't matter. We finished that 100-mile race, and it just again one of those things to just see that amazing thing of someone who showed up, who was just like, I need a community. And it just immediately just started growing and what people were doing. And so that
Hmm.
was one thing that hugely shocked me was just as soon as they kind of had a group, immediately some of the leaps and bounds some people were able to make and feel inspired to kind of move into some other things. So
Yeah.
I love that part of it.
Yeah. I think there's something too about just moving your body gets the adrenaline going a little bit, which can kind of help you start talking, getting the
Yeah,
processing the emotions. Um,
absolutely.
so tell us a little bit about your grief journey then. You said you lost your son 5 years ago. Yeah,
Yes,
2020. So
5 years
5 years
ago.
ago now. So if you're
Yes.
comfortable to share, share a little bit about that. What was your journey like?
It was very, very hard. It was Brecken, and of course I'll get very sad talking about it because it's,
That's okay.
5 years, but it's still always very difficult. But just a great kid, 18 years old, just started college, and had a alcohol related accident. So he just overconsumed, needed some friends to count on, and they ultimately let him down. And which is which is really, really hard to hear and to be a part of, but it's also part of what's ingrained in this group too, of making sure you're watching out for your people, you're
Hmm.
taking care of each other, and you're taking care of each of yourselves. So it was extremely difficult on us. But my wife, being the amazing person she is, one of the first things, of course, she's heavy into research. So she looked up and was like, marriages where a child dies, like it was something ridiculous, like 80% of them fail
Yep.
within like a year or two,
Yeah.
pretty quickly. And so she was like, that's not going to be us. What do we need to do today to make
Yeah.
sure the three of us remaining in the family are can make it happen?
Yeah.
And and so we just made a very concerted effort as the three of us to be like, someone needs something, say it.
Yeah.
We're gonna take care of each other. We're gonna move through this. And it was very, I mean, extremely difficult, but the flip side of that is when I look at my family now and the changes we've made and kind of who we are and what we're doing is we call it the gift of Brecken because he kind of enlightened us to really look hard at who we were, what we were doing, and like having what we call that snow globe moment, where everything just gets shaken up and it resettles totally different.
Hmm.
Might look the same from the outside, but it's not. It just kind of inspired us to really make some wholesale changes where we lived, what we were doing. My wife and I have both changed careers since then,
Hmm.
and I think we're in a much happier place overall, even though we suffered this horrendous loss. And
Yeah.
I think there's so much with grief is that kind of that dual-sided part of it,
Hmm.
on that one hand, the first time I remember laughing after he died, and I felt guilty. You
Yeah.
know, I'm
Yeah.
sitting here laughing. Well, I have a dead kid. What the hell's wrong with me?
Yeah.
And it's so hard. That's part of, I think, the hardest thing to manage, or going to the grocery store and, someone would ask about him and that made me feel like crap, but if someone
Hmm.
didn't ask about him, that made me feel like crap.
Yeah.
You're like, how does
There's
this
no
work?
winning here.
There's no winning. And it just was amazing. And I think my one big thing with grief I found it to be such an amplifier. Whatever you're feeling or wherever you are, it just amplifies it. So if
Hmm.
you're sad, you're extra sad. If you're
Hmm.
kind of like happy, you get almost like manic feeling, or if you're focused, you're laser focused. And it really kind of shone some spotlights and some blind spots in our lives and our perceptions, I
Yeah.
think, that we were missing. And it, again, was a way that we, I think, very purposefully tried to make a positive, again, where there
Yeah.
just wasn't one.
Yeah. And thank you for mentioning the feeling guilty about laughing. I talk about that all the time. It's we we don't talk about these things ever as a society, so whatever we feel is wrong, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
the
Yeah.
first time, like I remember cracking jokes at my brother's funeral and wondering, is somebody gonna look at me for like, but anybody that knows me knows that's just my sense of humor, right? I
Yeah.
crack jokes at inappropriate times. That's how I cope. I also cry,
You do what you got to do.
right? I also cried a lot at his funeral. So, but when we feel there's just so much judgment around emotions, and emotions are just emotions. There should never be anyway.
I mean,
But
it's everyone feels them, everyone has them. You may not acknowledge them, you may not understand them.
yeah.
The other thing that I found amazing was talking through all of this, like with my wife afterwards, I realized how like our generation was very failed at learning feelings. And I
Hmm.
did not understand feelings or emotions nearly as well as I thought I did. And
Yeah.
this was a crash course on it. And it was like, oh, come on, parents, you know, dang,
Right?
that's tough, not knowing about feelings. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, yeah, don't understand them or have to feel shameful or,
Yeah.
told you have to hide them, you can't feel them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the generation I grew up, which I think we're similar in age, was very much stiff up, not just stiff upper lip. And I'm also Midwestern, right? I'm from the Midwest, so it's always like keep that stuff in. But
Yeah.
it's the like, what would anybody think? Or you're being too emo I'm a very highly sensitive person. I'm fully admit that. I'm very emotional. I'm not afraid to express my emotions, and that makes people
Yeah.
uncomfortable. So then it's
Yeah.
the like, oh, well, don't do that. You're going to make people feel. I'm like, I don't care what other people feel. I'm feeling this right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I don't really have the capacity to worry about what they're feeling because
right,
I've got all this going on.
right.
you know?
I'm sorry my brother's death made you uncomfortable. I'm really freaking sad right now.
Yeah.
Or I'm really angry and I'm going to scream about it. Like,
Yeah, and it's hard. It really is, and that
mhm,
was one of the things so many people said that would come to talk to us is they were like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to
mhm,
do. You know, do
mhm.
we talk about them? Do we don't talk
Yeah.
about them?
Mhm.
I I know he died from drinking. Can we have a beer? Can we not have a beer? Like
Yeah.
everything about it just was because people don't know.
Yeah.
There's no discussion. There's
I
no playbook
know.
for it.
No.
It's something everyone will experience. Yet here we are. Let's
Yeah.
save it for a mystery at the end, I guess, you know?
Yeah, and there is no guidebook on this, right? Like even and that's just it. You don't know where somebody is in their grief. And people ask me all the time, like, well, what do I do? What do I say to this person? It's like, I don't know the answer to that because I don't know where they are in their grief. That's why I just
Yeah,
check in with, you don't have to have a whole big thing. Just be like, hey, how are you today? Like what's
yeah,
and just the general how are you is always an impossible question to answer, right?
yeah,
So it's like,
yeah,
what's going well for you today or what's not going well for you today? How are you
yeah.
coping today? Would you like to talk about it? And then let them guide you. If they don't want to talk about it, they will tell you.
Yeah, yeah, that was the other thing. Or the other thing I loved is at a certain time people would just come over and be like, "Hey, do you want to talk? You know,
Yeah.
do you have anything you want to talk about him? Do you want to just sit here in silence? Do you want me
Hmm.
to tell you about the crappy, boring stuff that's happened in my
Yeah.
office job, just so you can hear crappy,
Yeah.
day-to-day stuff?" And it's like,
Yeah.
and the other thing is, that all changed day to day, minute to minute sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's it, it will change. And the most important thing about that aspect of just reaching out and being like, "Do you want to talk about anything today?" Whatever, is just
Yeah.
knowing that you're seen. Somebody
Yes.
sees you and they know that you've had this loss and they want to help somehow,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
What? Absolutely. One of my best friends, he was very much, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help, but he's like, what I'm telling you is I'm cooking, three extra plates of dinner every night for the next month. And he was like, there's an open invitation. If you show up, food's there. If you don't show up, it's completely fine. Don't tell me, just show up. And I
I
was
love
like,
that.
that is an amazing thing to do. And again, I never felt obligated. And we did go a couple of times. We'd just be like, you know what? Screw it. We're going to Mike's house. Thanks, Mike. you know?
Yeah. I love that. I think that's fantastic.
And it
So,
was one of those things of like, hey, I'm being thoughtful. You're thought of, but I'm not also going to be up in your business.
right,
I don't,
I'm not going to
you
bug
know,
you about it.
yeah, it's not going to be
Oh,
every day. Hey, you coming to dinner tonight? You coming to, And I was
yeah.
like, good for you, man. That was
Yeah.
nice. Very thoughtful thing. So,
Yeah, and I always I always encourage people to offer specific help instead of the if you ever need anything, because I don't know what I need day to day.
oh, yeah,
Um, but yeah,
absolutely.
offers the specific like, and that's a fantastic. I love that. I'm going to use that. Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you,
Yeah. I love
friend.
it. Yeah, definitely. Again, and the food is very much like his love language. So it's like I know when you're offering that, it's like this is the most sincere thing
Hmm.
and the most loving thing you can offer right now. And
Hmm.
yeah, it was just like that's amazing.
Yeah, I go for walks like pretty much every single day, and if I know somebody's going through something, I might call them, and be like, "Hey, I'm going to go for a walk. Do you want to come with me?" And
Yeah,
see if they want to just get out and go for we don't have to talk, we just walk, but I love that.
yeah, yeah.
So you had mentioned earlier, and I kind of wanted to touch on this because I talk about
Of course.
stigmatized grief a lot. The concept of well, he died from alcohol. Are we allowed to have a beer? There's so much stigma around deaths related to alcohol, overdose, suicide, things like that. So what was your experience in how people reacted to his death?
So interestingly, he that you bring up suicide in there as well because he died on a college campus,
Mhm.
local college, and they put out a kind of vague story of a kid had died, and then they never followed up. So the vast majority of the people that we met kind of assumed that the way it was worded was it was suicide,
Oh,
and so that created a whole nother thing is because people didn't want to bring it up as that's what they thought it was, and then we ended up having to kind of go through and telling a little more of a story sometimes, which is also not a great story either, and
right.
just it just was very very hard in a lot of ways because I feel like it was almost double stigmatized in that way of everyone thought it was this, and then you had to have the alcohol conversation, and which was a whole nother shocking thing because I mean, as far as we knew, like he was not a very avid drinker, didn't really care about it. But for whatever reason, that night decided that he was going to go drinking, and he had just come back from a 2 week long road trip too, which was amazing because it was COVID, and so all his classes were virtual. And so one day
Mhm.
he just left, and we saw him on Life 360. He was in Indiana. My wife called and was like, Becca, what are you doing? And so he, yeah, had gone on this 2 week road trip by himself, made it to the West Coast all over, had a great time. had come back, and it was actually the night he came back, and so we also didn't get to follow up on his whole trip either. And I was just, I don't know, there was a lot there with it that was, it was very shocking. And so I think there was a lot of confusion with it.
Sure.
Sorry, returning back to your actual question,
It's
because
okay.
I'm all about tangents, for sure. Uh, but yeah, I think it was just, it was hard. And I think that it also kind of forced us sometimes into, I think, divulging the story, maybe in cases where I normally wouldn't have, where
Okay.
I could have just been like, hey, it's just, he had an accident with alcohol, or he had an accident here. But I think enough people had seen on the news that they, again, thought it was suicide. And so I feel like we kind of almost had to go out of our way a little more sometimes to
Sure.
just be a little more clear with it. And I
Hmm.
was, I don't know. It just was, it made it harder in some ways, again, because you don't always want to get into that with everyone.
Right.
It's we have that conversation too of, figuring that level of people of where you're going to get in there. You're not going to
Yeah.
go to the grocery store clerk and tell her, all
Yeah.
about how your son died, or all about how your
Right.
brother died,
Right.
you
Guess
know,
what?
but but then there's other people you're like, oh, like
Yeah.
the house cleaners came in one day, and they had been cleaning the house for a couple of years, and like all of a sudden his room was really empty, and they were like, hey, and it was like, oh crap. We got to talk to
Yeah.
the house cleaners about this, and things
Right.
I didn't really think about. And yeah,
Hmm.
so it's, I don't know. So it's so interesting in so many ways, just the gambit of emotions. And I think that's a whole nother thing is, I think people hear grief and they think sad, and it's like, no, it is every emotion turbocharged all of the time.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and especially when it comes to accidental deaths, right? And your son's death was very much an accident because, like you said, he was 18. He wasn't like he was drinking all the time. He
Yeah.
just, you know, had the accident that night. And it's I don't know where I was going with this, but it's harder to have those to kind of like bring that up to people or when people ask about it because you might not see somebody for 6 months. They're like, hey, how's your son?
Yeah.
Well, um, yeah, and I the spectrum of emotions. I lost somebody longer time back prior to my brother who was had an alcohol problem and died from alcohol use.
Yeah.
And that was really hard. It was weird and difficult because at the memorial service, like all these people that hadn't seen him in so long were like, "Man, what happened?" Well, and then we had to explain that he,
Yeah.
had a drinking problem and then there's the line of like, do we even tell people? Like, so it makes it confusing for the person
Yeah.
left behind to say to make that decision. Like, do we tell people? Do we not tell people? And then you were
Yeah.
thrust into it by misinformation.
Yeah, and it's really hard. And in, some ways too, I feel like, he was just an 18-year-old kid who made a, a mistake that most every
Right.
other 18-year-old kid makes on a college campus.
Oh yeah.
His turned out he didn't, survive it. And it's hard. And in so many ways, I feel like we kind of have to protect his legacy in that way, because I
Mhm.
don't want him, he was a very smart kid. He was a very careful kid. This, he was very much wanted to be in control of everything. And I think even if he would have known, hey, I'm going to
Mhm.
drink to a point where I don't have control anymore,
Mhm.
I, I don't think it's something he would have done. So it's very weird because there's just a lot of out of character stuff there, and just,
Yeah.
yeah, trying to just process it all and then just sort through it. It just complicated it in a way that I never would have known. And being it's the
Yeah.
first and only time I've gone through that, you don't even know
Yeah.
what's abnormal in kind of an abnormal setting.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like if I could just get every teenager and be like, look, if you're gonna drink, you're gonna drink. But for the love of God, have responsible people around you and you
Yeah,
know your limits and just I get
and
it. We're
yeah,
young, we want to have fun, but at the same time, like this happens.
yeah, and if your gut is telling you that something's wrong, call for help. That's
Hmm.
the other thing is, there was multiple people once they did depositions and talked to everyone, because they had to have sled involved because it was on a college campus. The interviews, it seemed like there was multiple people that were very concerned, but no one just did anything about it. and it was just like, well, if you're that concerned, just make the call. It's
Yeah,
okay,
that breaks my heart.
it's okay.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I was a kid once too, and I know I always had that fear of getting in trouble. It's like, oh well, I don't want to
Yeah,
cause all the trouble or have anybody get mad at me for calling the police or calling 911 on my friend.
yeah, yeah.
Oh my God, if it's a matter of life and death, just
Yeah. And
oh,
that's some of the harder parts there is there was clearly
sure,
people that were concerned, and there were some that, oh well, we were afraid we were going to get in trouble, or I was afraid I might lose a scholarship, or
right.
what.
And I'm not no shame on them, right? Like
Yeah, I get it, but
y- yeah,
yeah,
obviously I know we all wish they would have made that call, right?
yeah.
But I can't imagine what they're going through right now.
No, I mean and that's one of those things. It's hard for so many people on
Hmm.
so many levels, and I'm like, couple of those kids there. There's no way they're not going to have real long term effects from that as well.
Hmm.
And so that was the other thing. Is so like when we tried to communicate with some of them, just be like, go talk to a therapist, go get help. Like, you know, you need to not let
Yeah.
this build and let this become an issue for you down the road either.
Right,
You
right.
know, and it's because it's just one of those things that you just kind of have to look at it and again be like, this is tragic and this is sad. But I knew that if I quit, you know, doing what I was doing, I might as well have died that day too,
Hmm.
Or if my wife just holds up and she's like, I can't do anything anymore, and I think that's the hard part is, it's yes, we lost someone close to us, but we still have our lives here. We still have to
Hmm.
figure out what to do and how to still move forward because
Yeah,
I mean, you have to do that too. And
yeah,
again, it goes back to that whole weird duality of it of you're like, how do I go on? But
yeah,
I have to go on.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So what's the alternative?
Yeah. And
And
it's hard.
I've had other people on this show before, and I always applaud this, but no shame to anybody who doesn't. When something like this happens, you suffered a tragic loss, and you could have just let yourself, crawl into your own body and never come out again, right? But
Yeah.
you chose to keep going and you chose to start something to help other people. And again, no, if somebody doesn't go that route, that's fine. Not saying everybody who suffers a loss has to start a nonprofit or do something
Yeah.
huge, but
Oh yeah.
but you at least picked up yourself and kept going while still grieving and still respecting and honoring your son. And you
Yeah.
created something amazing to help other people.
That's really, and the interesting thing is it was never anything I was set out to do. But
Hmm.
I feel like I had worked with a nonprofit before that worked with veterans with PTSD, and we'd go sailing. And I was a sailboat captain for a while with this for a couple
What?
of years. And it was just really cool. And so I had an experience there and I saw like what that did for those guys.
Yeah.
And so I think through my life, I just picked up enough little things that at a certain point I looked and I was just like, yeah, yeah, this just makes sense. And it wasn't what I wanted to do. It certainly doesn't necessarily play to my strengths either. I I'm not designed to be a nonprofit executive director, but I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I don't like to promote myself on social media or necessarily go on podcasts and talk about myself. It makes me uncomfortable a lot of times. But guess what? I'm gonna go do it
You're
because I
doing it.
also know it's part of that growth and part of making me the best person I could be.
Hmm.
And I do that in part again to continue to honor him and be like, you know what, the horrible loss, but let's make a positive where we can.
Yeah.
It just seems like the best one of the best things I could do both for myself and for others moving forward.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. So if you could pass off one piece of wisdom to another parent out there, or friend, or brother, or sister, anybody who has lost somebody to something like an accidental alcohol poisoning or a situation similar, what would you tell them?
Oh, that's a great question. It's I think the thing is you have to. I think there's a couple hard realizations you have to make, and one of them is you can't ever go back. is one, because I think so many people are like, I just want to go back to what it was. That I think that one of the first things you can do is say, okay, that's just not a possibility.
Right.
What's my next best option?
Hmm.
And to kind of get people moving. And again, it's not fast. I spent probably easily a week, in a dark room with lights off for the
Yeah.
first week. It was not just I popped up on day two and said, nonprofit, here I come.
Right.
It was long. And even, he died in 2020 and I didn't start the nonprofit till 2022. And
Hmm.
functionally, the nonprofit didn't really start to become a thing until late 2023 into early 2024, because
Hmm.
so much of it was me working through my stuff as part of getting the nonprofit set up.
Yeah.
On those days where it's like, I don't want to do anything. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go do some paperwork, or I'm going to go send an email, or I'm going to go schedule a call, or I'm going to go find a route that might work for this thing. And it gave me something to kind of move forward. So I think definitely the big thing is you have to realize going back's not an option.
Yeah.
What can you do moving forward? And it's not fast. And I think you have to honor your feelings in that and honor where you are and honor that it may take years, whatever. And again, knowing that even though I 5 years on, I feel wholer now than I have in a long time, I still have that, Brecken shaped hole right here in my chest. And
Yeah.
I always will.
Hmm.
And so it's really just kind of hard to put some of those into words, I guess, as I just sort of ramble on.
Yeah. No, that I think it just you can't go back. Like
Yeah.
that's I never thought to say it that way, but yeah, because so many people, when I work with folks as a grief coach, they're like, I just want to be back to normal, are the words they use. I
Yes.
just want to be back to normal. I'm like, well, it's a new normal now, pumpkin. So let's figure out what the
Yeah.
new normal is, right? I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
sorry, they're not coming back, so we can't go back to the way it was. So it's a perfect
Yeah.
way to put it. Awesome.
Yeah. And I think that was one of those things that once we could accept that, you could go, okay, now I at least know this is the direction I need to go. And
Hmm.
at least felt like you could kind of start that movement. So, because that's the other hard thing is, sometimes you do see people and they get stuck in that spot and they
Yeah.
just can't take those first steps to get moving, and it's really really difficult because it's almost like it's until you get it in your head of like, okay, I can do this.
Hmm.
You can't convince someone to do it. It's like
Right.
trying to convince an alcoholic to go get treatment until they say, you know what,
Yep.
I need to do something about this. And
Hmm.
it's very very hard because now as I've gotten older and I have more friends who've lost parents or siblings or whatever, and I've encountered it a little more. You kind of get a little more of a vision of
Hmm.
how people handle it, and it is such a wide swath from completely shut down to, oh, I'm going to be totally fine, and you're shot out of a cannon and you're like, okay. And
Are you
so it's,
though?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just kind of a little more interesting. And I guess the other part of it is I'm probably thankful that I hadn't experienced anything like super close or anyone really like
Hmm.
that kind of grief that close before, where I also didn't have any like real preconceived notions. Like everything
Hmm.
just was so blown away, and so everything was so new. You just kind of were like, I don't have time to think about this. I don't have time to, I think this is the next best move. Let's just
Hmm.
go with it and hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you. All right. So I have a little tradition on my podcast. At the end of the
Okay.
episode, I'm going to pull a
All
card
right.
at random from the death deck, and then
Okay.
you will answer it, and then I will answer it because fair is fair.
Okay.
So I always do this on screen so people can see that I legitimately am
Okay.
pulling at random. Uh, I just read this one. I'm going to pick another one because I literally
Okay.
just read that like 2 episodes ago. Oh, this one's kind of a deep one. Oh, all
Oh,
right.
oh, oh, okay. I
I
better
know.
get
Get ready.
prepared
Get
here.
ready. What do you believe happens when you die?
Oh, this is a great question. Okay, so I grew up very much in a like non-religious, very scientific type house, and I was very much a you die, it's lights out, it's over, you're done. I will completely amend that now since Brecken has passed, and I have a much different idea on that. I think that there's very much an energy, a consciousness of there's something going on, whether you want to call it a god or whatever. I feel like there's something there, and there's clearly some way that things can communicate beyond. We have, again, like I said, we've made some big wholesale changes. We've gone down to Casadega, Florida, and talked to the spiritual mediums a few times just because. And we've had a great time and got some wonderfully accurate readings that were amazing. And one of my favorite things is my wife had told me at one point, she was like, if you just talk to Brecken and ask for a sign, he'll give you one. And I was like, okay, whatever. I was like, well, I'm not going to be willy-nilly with this. I'm just going to wait and see what happens. And there was one day I was feeling especially down and I was really missing him. And we were getting ready to go to a concert on Isle of Palms. I see one of our favorite bands from Georgia. And I was just like, you know what, Brecken, I could use something today. You got something for me. And so we go to this concert, and I kind of just didn't even forgot about it by that point. And the lead singer of this band comes out, and I'm originally from Wyoming. There are like 12 people from Wyoming. No one's from Wyoming. This guy comes out in this shirt that says 307, which is the area code in Wyoming I'm from, with the big buffalo state emblem on it, and starts
Hmm.
playing. And I was like, I got you, Brecken. I got it. Thanks. You know. And so since then, I have wholesale changed. So yeah, I definitely think that there's an energy out there. There's, whether it's another dimension of whether there's just floating along here. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's more than meets the eye there now. So
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but I'm firmly believe there's something going on there.
Yeah. We have very similar answers. And I recently had Mike Oppenheim from the Coffin Talk podcast on this show, and he asks this question of every single guest. And I
Love it.
hate being asked this question because I don't know how to answer it because I don't have like a firm answer. So many people are like, this is what happens. This is what happens.
Yeah.
And so I grew up in a very Christian household. We were very
Okay.
religious, not like crazy, or anything, but like a very religious household. And
Yeah.
I was always taught, we go to heaven when we die. We go to be with God and with Jesus and all that. And I don't know what I believe these days, but there's parts of me that thinks it's just lights out. That's it. We're done. But I'm with you. I've seen way too much that leads me to believe that that's not the case. What it
Yeah.
is, I don't know. I like to think I've referenced this on the show, but on this podcast before. Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Buddhist monk,
Yes.
familiar, yeah. He gave a reference in his book No Death, No Fear about matches and how like you have wood and sulfur and all these things, and then you have a strike plate, and when you bring them together, a flame occurs, right? So all these things came together to make this flame. And when the flame goes away, now there's vapor, the wood is still there, the sulfur is just in a different form. Like all those things are still there, but that flame is not.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that makes so much sense. So it's like we're
Yeah.
all little particles, and when we die, those little particles are still there. They're just
Yeah.
not in this one thing. So I don't
Yeah,
know. I
yeah.
don't know.
We saw another movie recently and they talked about it like drops of water. Like how there's this like whole thing of souls and it's all waters, but when the one like when as it showed a boat going through and like splashes and droplets would pop up. And they
Hmm.
were like, your life is that water droplet. You've separated off, you're separate, you're up here, you come back and then you join the collective
Oh,
again, and you no longer separate. And I can't remember what that movie was, but I heard that
oh,
and I
I
looked at it
love that.
and I was like, same thing. I loved it. And I was like, I can't explain it beyond that. But I've since Brecken's passing, I've done yoga teacher training. We did some Hindu studying there. I've done Buddhist. I didn't grow up religious and I'm still not religious, but I'm absolutely fascinated by religions and like all of them.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I
me too.
love looking at all the different little things and traveling around and seeing how like death is part of the culture in like India and like
Hmm.
Thailand and some of these other places. And they talk about it all the time. They understand it. They have
Yeah.
things in place for it. Meanwhile, again, we're walking around, oh, that's not going to happen to
What do we
me,
do? What do we do? Yeah.
Yeah. So some of that is so fascinating to me. So I think mine is always changing just a
Yeah.
little bit with what I'm reading and as I'm going, but I'm also a
Yeah.
lot like you. There's so much I don't know, there's certain basic parts that I'm now like, no, I think I could be on board with at least this much of it.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't
Well,
know. It's a great question though.
for you or for anybody listening who is like us, if you have not read the book From Here to Eternity by Caitlin Dowdy, read it because she traveled around the world to learn about death practices from all different cultures, and it's so
Yes.
good. So,
That's amazing. I love it. I'll have
all
to put
right.
that on my to read list for sure.
Yes. All right, Sean, thank you so much for being on my show. Thank you for sharing the story, your story. I'm going to give you a minute here. Tell my listeners where they can find you. Tell them where they can find your cycling group if they're in the South Carolina area. Anything
Yeah,
else?
absolutely. Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram, grief underscore cycles, or you can go to griefcycles.org. Everything is on there. But yeah, that's all around South Carolina, again, right in the middle. I love to ride anywhere. And so even if you're just passing through, send me a DM. We can go ride together. I don't care. I love to go ride. I love to go show people
Yay.
around. If you're new to it and you're like, I don't know if I can go to 20 miles, cool, let's go do 5. Whatever.
Yeah,
I'm always into it. I'm here. I love a good reason to go ride bikes. So it's amazing. I'm all for it.
I love it. All right, Sean, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Nikki. It's always wonderful talking to you. You're just amazing.
Aw, thank you. All right. Thank you again so much, Sean, for sharing your story with me and my listeners. I'm so happy to have met you, so happy to know you. You can find Sean at griefcycles.org. I'll put stuff in the description. Everything you mentioned will be down in the description below, so find your linky links down there. I'm pointing downwards. I don't know. You can find me at nikkithedeathdoula.com. I would love for you to come say hello to me. Let me know your thoughts. If you have any suggestions on the show. You can get some merch there too. If you go to up in the top corner, a little button that says podcast, you can go there. You get the t-shirt, you get a mug, journal, stickers. Yeah. And there's information on the guests on my podcast on that page as well. I'm still building it out, so be patient with me. It might look a little different from time to time when you go in, but I'm trying to make sure I've got the information for my guests, and if they've got books and things like that for sale, put that in there as well. So you can check me out there. You can also find me on Substack. And if you're a caregiver, you can come over to my virtual caregiver space. You can get information from that on the front page of my website as well, Caregivers United. So that is all. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. And remember, as always, your grief is yours, your feelings are valid, and grief doesn't always have to suck. Good Grief with Nikki the Death Doula is produced by Nikki Smith of Nikki the Death Doula LLC in Columbus, Ohio. Nikki the Death Doula LLC is for consulting, education, emotional support, and guidance, and is no way considered a funeral establishment or licensed mental health establishment. Scripts, editing, sound design, literally everything with this podcast is done solely by Nikki Smith of Nikki the Death Doula LLC, with the exception of the music. The music is Cheery Monday by Kevin MacLeod. Licensing information can be found at filmmusic.io.